Well, welcome, folks, to this special update of the 700 Club. The Supreme Court issued a stunning ruling this morning, upholding the vast majority of President Obama's health care law by a margin of 5-4. And among the ones in the majority writing the decision, Chief Justice Roberts. Both Republicans and Democrats were surprised by the ruling. President Obama and Mitt Romney both spoke out about the decision. And in my opinion, here's the president.
Of the Affordable Care Act, the name of the health care reform we passed 2 years ago. In doing so, they've reaffirmed a fundamental principle that here in America, in the wealthiest nation on earth, no illness or accident should lead to any family's financial ruin.
Clear that we understand what the court did and did not do. What the court did today was say that Obamacare does not violate the Constitution. What they did not do was say that Obamacare is good law or that it's good policy.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, I know it came as a shock to many of us, but in my humble opinion, and I put it out right now, the Republicans ought to get on the ground and kiss the ground that Chief Justice Roberts walks on, because in that decision, he handed them the presidency and control of the Congress in the next election. $300,000 came to the Romney campaign in the first hour after this decision was announced. But to take an analysis of the legal part of this decision, with us now is Jay Sekulow of the American Center for Law and Justice. Jay, you and I thought that the guys were going to turn down that individual mandate, and yet only 4 of them voted against it. What's the score?
I tell you what happened here, and Pat, you and I had this conversation early on. I was very concerned about the tax. Everybody was talking about the Commerce Clause, and you'll remember early on you and I were talking about the taxing authority. And the taxing authority of Congress is much broader. And what the court did here and what the Department of Justice did, and as the case was being litigated, they moved from the Commerce Clause, or they still used the Commerce Clause, but went towards the taxing authority, that as a tax, Congress can impose a tax, and that if you don't pay for the Obamacare provisions, you pay a tax, which by 2016 for a family making $30,000 a year will be an increase of tax of over $2,000, almost $2,100, largest middle-class tax increase in our history. And it's a tax for doing nothing. You're not getting anything for it. You're being taxed for not doing something. But what John Roberts found was the Commerce Clause did not give authority to the president, but the taxing power did. Now, Justice Kennedy, Justice Scalia, Justice Thomas, and Alito thought that the taxing authority was not implicated here because, in fact, President Obama said this was not a tax. He publicly said this was not a tax. He was asked that by George Stephanopoulos because some people were already saying it was a tax, us included, and he said, no, 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 it's not a tax. And, of course, now it's a tax, and that's the only reason Obamacare was held constitutional, but it is constitutional under that taxing authority analysis. But, Pat, you hit a key thing on the politics of this. Yeah.
There was a fellow named Machiavelli, you remember, in Florence, and he wrote a book called The Prince about how you did sleight of hand. Do you suppose Roberts has a little Machiavellian in him? I mean, this thing's going to throw the election to the Republicans without question.
No, I think what John Roberts did here, John Roberts calls him as he sees it. And he denied and found that there was no Commerce Clause authority, which is a primary argument of the government. And he said it doesn't fit under the Commerce Clause. But he then said, where I disagree with John Roberts on this, was he said it fits under the taxing authority. Now, I find it difficult to make this a tax, although I was concerned about it, because the government has denied it was a tax, or the president denied it was a tax, certainly. So I don't think John Roberts was necessarily looking at the political calculations at all. I think at the end of the day, he calls balls and strikes. Sometimes you don't agree with the umpire, and this is a case where I don't agree with the umpire. But I think you're absolutely correct on the political ramifications of this. You mentioned Mitt Romney. Governor Romney's raised, I think it was probably $1 million by the end of today after this. Mitt Romney made a great statement where he said the Supreme Court held the law was constitutional, but they did not say it was a good law. Obamacare is a bad policy. It's a tax on the middle class, and it needs to go. And as you said, Pat, the only way it goes is if they get rid of it through the Senate and the House, and you get a president that's willing to push that forward. So I think in that sense, it helps Romney a lot.
Roberts' rhetoric, though, in this, I don't know if you call it obiter or what it is, but nevertheless, to call this thing a tax, at this point, the attack has been made against Romney that he wanted to raise taxes in Massachusetts on everybody. This is a tax on everybody, and Obama's got nowhere to hide.
Nowhere to hide. And what they did was to save their policy, they used the taxing authority. So now we've got the President of the United States running for re-election 5 months out from a general election. And what's happened here? He's had the biggest tax increase on the middle class in our history. I mean, we're close to it. $2,100 if you're making $30,000 a year as a family of four, and you've got to pay an increase of $2,100 in taxes if you don't participate in the government health care program, if you don't buy insurance. Well, a lot of people with $30,000 a year can't buy insurance. So this is a serious repercussion. I think you're right, Pat. The politics of this, they're going to use it to galvanize their base, too. I don't think we're naive here. They're going to say, I spent 3.5 years on this. We got this through. Isn't it great? But I think you're going to have a lot of Americans saying, no, it's not great. It's a tax increase. And the Republicans would be smart to start calling it that. The greatest tax increase in the middle class that we've known of. And that's what this really is.
Jay, you remember, of course, we all remember back to the Roosevelt days in those cases of the New Deal that came before the court struck down one after the other. And all of a sudden, in the Nebraska case, they said that the farmer who grew little pigs was engaged in interstate commerce. It was just crazy. But nevertheless, there's been an expansion of that Commerce Clause ever since. Does this case limit it from that point?
I think it did. I think that if there's a silver lining in this cloud, it's that a majority of the court, 5-4, found there's no Commerce Clause authority here. So the Congress does not have these broad sweeping ability to regulate every aspect of our lives. That's the positive. But I mean, again, I agree with the dissent here. I think this law should have gone. And by the way, the dissent would have struck the entire law. They would not have severed portions of it. The whole law would have gone. But John Roberts found the taxing authority there. But you're right. He said there was no Commerce Clause authority. And 5 justices agree no Commerce Clause authority, and that is significant for future cases involving government overreach. But again, this is still a pretty big government intrusion into our life, and it's going to reorder medicine in the United States, and the ramifications of that, I mean, we'll start looking a lot like Great Britain, and you don't see a lot of Americans going over to Great Britain for medical care, but you sure see a lot of Brits coming to the United States.
Somebody said to me about this, they said the progressives have been trying to get this in since the 30s, and they finally succeeded, but maybe not for long. What do you think?
I think that's right. I think the politics of this now makes the health care issue, the ObamaCare issue, is the #1 issue in this presidential election. And you've got one candidate that authored the bill. That is, of course, the President of the United States. You've got another candidate that says he would, on the first day of office, do everything he could to get rid of the bill. That's Governor Romney. And I think the reality is that this makes this a huge political issue. It doesn't go away. I don't think you're going to see this pile on John Roberts, because on the taxing authority issue, it was, like I said, I agree with the dissent. He was playing umpire, as I said. I think the real pile-on, if you will, is the political pile-on, and that's going to be on both sides. It'll be very interesting in the next few days to see how that plays out. But, Pat, you've said this so many times. American people have a short memory. What's going to happen? We're going into the holiday weekend, or the holiday week. How do you you're the expert on this. How does this play out politically? What do you think?
Oh, I think it'll come up every time you turn around. I mean, all the advertising is going to be shifted. It's going to be, taxing on the middle class. Obama wants to tax the middle class. Oh, I mean, it's a spin doctor's heyday. There's no more legal challenge to any of this, is there?
There's not. I'll tell you what legal challenges do remain, and that is the mandate, the HHS mandate, which emanates out of the Obamacare bill. Those, and we're challenging those, have been filed as separate lawsuits. Those lawsuits continue at the district courts. That the mandates that were put forward, that the Catholic Church was objecting to, that a lot of American business owners were objecting to, those will continue. But the direct challenges to the health care law, there were a few cases pending at the Supreme Court, including one of ours. Those cases, I suspect, will be this afternoon denied.
Well, now, there was another thing.
Certiorari will be denied.
It talked about the 10th Amendment and the states.
Yep.
I understand that they carved out for the states. If the states don't want to comply with some of this, they don't have to?
Right. Because of some of the Medicaid Yeah, the extension of the Medicaid, the majority of the court, Justice Roberts' opinion, felt like it was intruding on the state's sovereignty and their ability to determine the best way to deploy funds at their disposal. So, again, it was a narrowing back of it. It did not strike that Medicaid expansion provision down. It narrowed it as far as what the federal government can do as compared to what the state could do. I said that if John Roberts was writing the opinion, it was going to be narrower in scope and would be finessed because John Roberts is a great lawyer. Like I said, I disagree with him on this. He did this exactly as an umpire. I think that he called it a strike. I would have called it a ball. And I think as the 4 dissenting justices did. But at the end of the day, it is right back at the political level where it's going to be as you said correctly, it's going to be the issue over the next 5 months. There's no doubt about it. You're going to hear a lot of this on both sides at the convention. Sure. You're going to see it. So there it is.
Jay, thank you very much. Jay Sekulow of the American Center for Law and Justice, ladies and gentlemen.